Parallel and perpendicular lines. Let's start out with parallel. By definition, two lines are parallel if they have the same slope. So if you were to look at the equations for these two lines, the m1, or the slope for this blue line, is going to be the same as m2, the slope of the purplish line. When two lines have the same slope, they will have the same tilt, which means that if you graph them, they're never going to touch if they're different lines. Let's do an example. Write an equation for the line parallel to y equals negative 3x minus 2 and passing through the point 3, 1. To get a better sense of what's going on here, I'm going to graph the line given and I'm going to plot that point. So our line equation is y equals negative 3x minus 2. This negative 2 is the y-intercept. So I can first go down to negative 2 and just kind of make a point there. I plot the y-intercept. Now our slope is negative 3. In other words, m is equal to negative 3. Now it's useful to write this negative 3 as a fraction, so I'm going to write it as negative 3 over 1, and then put the negative sign either on the top or the bottom in order to plot another point on this graph by using the slope. So I'm going to put it on the bottom, although you could put it on the top. And so if the number on the top is 3, that's our rise, and it's positive, so we're going to go up. And the number on the bottom is our run, and it's negative, so we're going to go left. So to get another point on this graph, I'm going to go up 3, and then I'm going to go over 1. So our second point is at negative 1, 1. And I got that by using the slope here. Okay, so that's the line equation they've given us. What is the point they're referring to? So they say they want us to graph a line or write an equation for a line that's parallel to this line I just graphed, and we want it to pass through 3, 1. So what does it mean to pass through 3, 1? Well, it means our line is going to go, or our second line is going to go through 1, 2, 3, 1. So it's going to go through that point. So here's our point 3, 1. Now, visualizing, what's going on here, the idea is they want us to find an equation for a line that passes through this point and is parallel to the one in the picture here. In other words, it's going to look like this. It's going to go through 3, 1, and it's going to be parallel to the black line. Now, what does it mean to be parallel? It means the slope of this line has to be the slope of the black line. Well, the black line we know has slope negative 3. So we know that this black line has slope m equal negative 3. We can read that off from the line equation. So that means the slope of the blue line, in order to be parallel, it has to have slope negative 3 as well. Okay, so where do we go from here? Well, we have a line, and we know it goes through the point 3, 1. And we know it's supposed to have slope m equal to negative 3. If we know the slope of a line and a point that it goes through, that's enough to find its equation. So how do we find the equation for a line when we know its slope and a point? We can actually use this y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1 general equation for a line. That's a point slope form. Because if we have the general equation for a point slope form, we can then plug the slope of the line in, which is negative 3, and then we can plug our specific point 3, 1 in for x1 and y1. So if I plug the slope in, I get this. And then if I plug in our point, which is 3, 1, I get y minus 1 equals negative 3 times x minus 3. So right here I'm using the fact that m is equal to negative 3 and x1 comma y1 is equal to 3, 1 for this line that we want the equation of. Now at this point, you can either leave your equation like this, or you can solve for y. So the most common thing is to solve for y. And this is the equation for the line that is perpendicular to the line given and goes through the point 3, 1. Okay, let's look at perpendicular lines. Two lines are perpendicular if they intersect at a right angle. Perpendicular lines have the property that their slopes are negative reciprocals of each other. So these two lines are perpendicular. They intersect each other at a right angle. This is our symbol for right angle, or 90 degrees. Now, what's the relationship between the slopes of perpendicular lines? Well, they have this property that one of the slopes is equal to -1 over the other slope. You'll also see this sometimes written like this. M1 times M2 is equal to -1. Okay, let's do an example. Write an equation for a line perpendicular to y equals 4x minus 2 and passing through the point 12, -6. This time I'm going to skip drawing the picture because we don't technically need to draw the picture to do this problem, or the previous one. So we're given an equation for a line, and we want to find the line that is perpendicular to this one and passes through this point. So the line that we're looking for, has to go through 12, -6 and be perpendicular to y equals 4x minus 2. So let's talk about what it means for the line to be perpendicular to this one. If the line is perpendicular to this, it has slope equal to -1 over the slope of this line. So perpendicular means the slope is not the same, so it's not 4. If it was parallel, the slope would be 4. Perpendicular means the slope is going to be -1 divided by the slope of this one. So it's -1 over 4. In other words, we're trying to find a line that has the following two properties. So we need the line to have m equals -1 over 4 and x1, x2, or sorry, x1, y1 equal to the point that we're given, 12, -6. If you have the slope of the line and a point that it goes through, that's enough to determine its equation. So let me just summarize. They tell us to find an equation for a line perpendicular to the one given, which tells us that the slope has to be -1 over 4, and going through this point, and this point is going to be our x1, y1. Okay, so we can use this general equation, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, and then we can plug in y1, which is -6, and then we can plug in m, which is -1 over 4, and then we can plug in x1, which is 12. From here, we can solve for y to put it in y equals mx plus b form.